What's going on, guys? Oftentimes in car audio, we'll build something or we'll install a speaker somewhere in the vehicle that we want to be able to easily disconnect. As an example, let's say that we have this tweeter and we're installing it into a door panel. We wouldn't want to solder this to the speaker wires because then when we go to remove that door panel, we're not going to be able to do so without clipping the wires. We must have the ability to easily disconnect these speaker wires. Now in the Jeep build that I'm working on right now, I added aftermarket speaker wires for the rear sound bar that has the rear speakers. So I wanted to make sure that if I ever needed to remove this sound bar, I could do so easily by simply disconnecting the speaker wiring. So what is a good, really robust way to connect speaker wires, but yet be able to simply take them apart? That's coming up in this video where I'm going to show you guys these special connectors. What's up, Fabrication family? Mark here with CarAudioFabrication, the show where together we learn how to master car audio and how to design, build, and install your dream car audio system. And here on this channel, I do build videos, I do tutorials, and I do review videos just like this one. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. Now, I'm sure that many of you guys are familiar with these crimp-on spade connectors that we could use to disconnect speaker wires. The problem I have with these is I feel like they're not the most robust connection. I find that over time, as you detach them and attach them again, that this connection point kind of wears out and they can easily become disconnected. To me, these also just have kind of a cheap, dinky feel. They just don't seem very impressive. And for those reasons, that's why I've started to use these bullet style connections that I like a lot more. These connectors really seem to actually hold on to each other a lot better, and they're still simple to detach if we need to. Something else that's cool about these is once they are connected, the contacts are no longer exposed. These really are handy for a lot of different things. As an example, imagine that you had a speaker pod that had this tweeter in it, and the tweeter is installed into the pod, and let's say the wiring comes out of the pod and you have one of these connections on the outside of the pod. What's nice about that is now if you need to service the pod and remove it for any reason, you can just remove that whole pod and disconnect the speaker wiring. You're not having to actually remove the tweeter from the pod, disconnect the speaker wires, and then remove the pod. That's more work, and this seems to make it more serviceable if you could just disconnect the whole pod and take everything out at once. So you could use these for tweeters that are up in the sail panel, if you had speakers that are in an A-pillar type installation, again if you had door panels where the speakers were mounted to the door panel itself. All of these different applications are good choices to use these connectors. Now also, the housing of these connectors only allow the connectors to connect in one way. You can't flip the polarity on them. This is nice so that once you're actually wired to the connector, there's never any mistakes of accidentally connecting the wrong wires together. Now, in order to terminate the wire into these connectors, you do have to solder it, but I feel like soldering it is a little bit more robust of a connection, and I'm going to show you guys how we do that in a minute. So let's take a look now at how we actually connect the wires to these connectors. I'm going to start with using solder to tin the connection point. For links to the solder that I like to use, the soldering gun that I use, and these connectors, be sure to check the links down in the video description. Next, I use the soldering iron and solder to tin the wire, and take note that I've already applied heat shrink tubing to the wire. Now that the connector and the wire are both tinned, all I need to do is heat up the connection point on the connector and I can apply the wire and it will adhere itself in place. Once I've made all my connections, I can then push the heat shrink tubing up over the exposed part of the connector and use a heat gun to shrink it down. I of course repeat this process in the vehicle and then make all my connections. I was kind of skeptical at first if soldering and not crimping would be a great connection, but I found that once soldered, these are just as strong. You can easily disconnect them. I wouldn't recommend doing this. You should disconnect them by pulling on the housing, but I just wanted to show that it is strong enough, the solder points, that we can do this multiple times without failure. So I was able to find these connectors online in a package deal where it comes with some of the heat shrink tubing, which is pretty cool. And I was able to actually find them for under $1 a pair. So the link to where I found them you can find down in the video description. So there's some other options out there for making a connection like this, but I found that these are very reliable, and for the price, they're awesome. Let me know what you guys think about these connectors by posting a comment down below. It's always great to interact with you guys down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see some more wiring videos, be sure to check out one of my previous videos where I showed one of my favorite tools for actually crimping a connection onto a wire, and some other cool materials that I like to use in order to install the larger power wires onto amplifiers. You can check that video out over here. If you guys could do me a favor and just slam that like button really quick, that would be appreciated. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. A special thanks goes out to Eddie, Brian, Ali, Corey, Pedro, Finchy, EGA, Manuel, Rory, Truman, and Jerry, along with the rest of the Patreon support team. These guys really help out to make these videos possible, so if you would like to join the Patreon support team, click below. Thank you again for watching.